Welcome to the Transitions series of presentations. I am Dr. Sheldon Linsenberg. I'm a plastic surgeon with many transitioning clients, and stimulated by conversations with my patients, I have explored some cultural topics with focus on the trans community. For this installment of our exploration of societal reactions to transgenderism, we will look at the edicts and responsa which the world's religions currently espouse. To be clear, I don't claim to be an authority on any religion or belief system, and I've done my best to include the latest information uncovered in my readings to create this presentation. I welcome commentary and updates to the facts in this presentation, which will be considered in future modifications of the presentation. The relationship between transgender people and religion varies widely around the world. Religions range from condemning any gender variance to honoring transgender people as religious leaders. Views within a single religion can vary considerably. The Abrahamic religions are a group of Semitic-originated religious sects which claim descent from the practices of the ancient Israelites and the worship of the God of Abraham. The major Abrahamic religions in chronological order of founding are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Abrahamic religions with fewer adherents include the faiths descended from the Yazidi, Samaritanism, the Druze faith, the Baha'i faith, and Rastafari. Abrahamic religions have creation stories in which God creates people, male and female. This is sometimes interpreted as a divine mandate against gender variance. The Dharmic religions are Indian religions, also termed as Dharmic faiths or religions, and they are religions that originated in the Indian subcontinent, including Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism that follow the rules of Dharma. Dharma is a key concept in multiple meanings in the Indian religions. In Buddhism, Dharma means cosmic law and order, but is also applied to the teachings of the Buddha. In Hinduism, Dharma signifies behaviors that are considered to be in accord with Rita, the order that makes life and universe possible, and includes duties, rights, laws, conduct, virtues, and right way of living. Considerations of gender identity are understood by studying the essence of Rita. This video is not meant to be a deep dive into each religion, which is left up to each of you listeners if you want further understanding of a specific religion or sect within a religion. This video will be an overview of each major sect's current views regarding gender identity. Let us begin with the most populous religion on earth, Christianity. Christianity builds upon the writings of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament, with the New Testament. It presents eunuchs as acceptable candidates for evangelism and baptism, as demonstrated in the account of the conversion of an Ethiopian eunuch. Discussion has occurred about the significance of the selection of the Ethiopian eunuch as being an early Gentile convert to Christianity, the inclusion of a eunuch representing a sexual minority in the context of the time. While answering questions about marriage and divorce, Jesus says that there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Many Christian denominations exist, principally because they each uniquely interpret the early writings, including the writings that deal with gender identity. The more conservative or fundamental denominations tend to have a stricter and less inclusive stance on gender nonconforming ideas. Let's start with the most liberal of the Christian denominations. Unitarian Universalism, a liberal religion with roots in liberal Christianity, became the first denomination to accept openly transgender people as full members with eligibility to become clergy in 1979, and the first to open an office of bisexual, gay, lesbian, and transgender concerns even before that in 1973. In 1988, the first openly transgender person was ordained by the Unitarian Universalist Association. In 2002, Reverend Sean Dennison became the first openly transgender person in the Unitarian Universalist ministry called to serve a congregation. He was called to South Valley Unitarian Universalism Society in Salt Lake City, Utah. In 2003, the United Church of Christ General Synod called for full inclusion of transgender persons. In 2008, the United Methodist Church Judicial Council ruled that openly transgender pastor Drew Phoenix could keep his position. At the UMC General Conference the same year, several petitions that would have forbidden transgender clergy and added anti-transgender language to the Book of Discipline were rejected. In 2012, the Episcopal Church in the United States approved a change to their non-discrimination canons to include gender identity and expression. In 2014, Megan Rohrer became the first openly transgender leader of a Lutheran congregation, specifically the Grace Evangelical Lutheran Church of San Francisco. The Lutheran Church in Reykjavik, Iceland, stands at the end of a rainbow-painted street. In 2006, Albert Mohler, then president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, said, "Only God has the right to determine gender," adding, "Any attempt to alter that creation is an act of rebellion against God." He also stated, "Christians are obligated to find our definitions in the Bible. What the activists want to call sex reassignment surgery must be seen as a form of bodily mutilation rather than gender correction. The chromosomes will continue to tell the story. Gender is not under our control after all. When a nation's moral rebellion comes down to this level of confusion, we are already in big trouble. A society that can't distinguish between men and women is not likely to find moral clarity in any other area of life." In 2014, the Southern Baptist Convention approved a resolution at its annual meeting stating that God's design was the creation of two distinct and complementary sexes, male and female, and that gender identity is determined by biological sex, not by one's self-perception. Furthermore, the resolution opposes hormone therapy, transition-related care, and anything else that would alter one's bodily identity, as well as opposing government efforts to validate transgender identity as morally praiseworthy. Instead, the resolution asks transgender people to trust in Christ and to experience renewal in the gospel. In Islam, the term mukhanathan is used to describe gender-variant people, usually male to female transsexuals. Neither this term nor the equivalent for eunuch occurs in the Quran, but the term does appear in the Hadith, the sayings of Muhammad, which have a secondary status to the central Quran text. Within Islam, there is a tradition on the elaboration and refinement of extended religious doctrines through scholarship. This doctrine contains a transpositive passage by the scholar and Hadith collector Al-Nawawi. A mukhanath is the one who carries in his movements, in his appearance, and in his language the characteristics of a woman. There are two types. The first is the one in whom these characteristics are innate. He did not put them on by himself, and therein is no guilt, no blame, and no shame, as long as he does not perform any illicit acts or exploit it for money. The second type acts like a woman out of immoral purposes and he is the sinner and blameworthy. In 2016, a fatwa was introduced by 34 Pakistani religious scholars that by born intersex ones among the local Hajiras can marry themselves heterosexually if they are identified as specific male or female body by medical test. They can also marry heterosexually with the normal people. The status of Mukhanathan in Islam has been partially based on their inability to have penetrative sex with women, whether by inclination or due to anatomic interventions. They were allowed into harems but ejected if they displayed sexual interest in women. In some historical periods, when sanctions against gender variance were on the rise, castration was required, but some Mukhanathan reacted positively rather than negatively. Because Islam has no central governing body, it is not possible to state clear policies regarding issues of interest to LGBTQ people. Transgender men and women are recognized and accepted in many Islamic cultures around the world. In fact, the idea of a man or woman identifying as a member of the opposite gender is more likely to be accepted than that of a man or woman expressing sexual desire for someone of their own gender. There is no formal ordination process in Islam. The worship is most often led by imams who have completed extensive theological studies and have proven themselves strong leaders. Female and LGBTQ imams now hold leadership roles in many communities, including unity mosques. Imam Da'i Abdullah, founder and executive director of Mecca Institute, is one. Ani Zonenfeld, founder and executive director of MPV, is another, and Imam Amina Wadud, an independent Islamic scholar, is a third. These are three of the most prominent Muslim leaders working for LGBTQ inclusion today. As early as 1988, gender reassignment surgery was declared acceptable under Islamic law by scholars at Egypt's Al-Azhar, the world's oldest Islamic university. In Iran in 1987, Ayatollah Khomeini declared transgender surgical operations allowable. The basis for this attitude of acceptance is the belief that a person is born transgender but chooses to be homosexual, making homosexuality a sin. Nevertheless, many transgender Muslims after reassignment surgery suffer rejection both socially and culturally in their own communities due to their remaining place of origin. If one is unable to relocate to another region where they are not known, they often suffer verbal and physical violence. Iran carries out more sex change operations than any other nation in the world except for Thailand, also a Muslim country. It is sanctioned as a supposed cure for homosexuality, which is punishable by death under Iranian law. The government even provides up to half the cost for those needing financial assistance, and a sex change is recognized on the birth certificate. Returning to the references in the Torah of the eunuch, the term saris, generally translated to English as eunuch, appears 45 times in the Torah. It frequently refers to a trusted but gender-variant person who was delegated authority by a powerful person. It is unclear whether most were in fact castrated or had ambiguous genitalia. However, considering the rarity of the latter biologically, most eunuchs were probably made by hand of man with an ulterior purpose in mind. In Isaiah 56, God promises eunuchs who keep the Sabbath and hold fast to his covenant that he will build an especially good monument in heaven for them to make up for their childlessness. Here are some interpretations of the Torah by several Jewish denominations. Orthodox Judaism asserts that sex gender is an innate and eternal category based on verses in the book of Genesis about Adam and Eve and the creation of maleness and femaleness. Sex change operations involving the removal of genital organs are forbidden on the basis of the prohibition against anything which is mauled, crushed, torn, or cut. A further prohibition in Deuteronomy prescribes not only cross-dressing, but any action uniquely identified with the opposite sex, and this would also apply to an operation to transform sexual characteristics. There are nevertheless Orthodox authorities who recognize the efficacy of sex reassignment surgery in changing halachic or Jewish law sex designation. In 2007, Joy Ladin became the first openly transgender professor at an Orthodox institution, the Stern College for Women at Yeshiva University in Manhattan. Hasidic Judaism, a hyper-Orthodox denomination, as of now has no place for trans people as everything in the community is determined by gender roles. Most Hasidic Jews are barely aware of trans people, and the topic is never discussed openly. The first person to come out as trans in a Hasidic community was trans activist and writer Abby Stein, who was also a straight descendant of Hasidic Judaism's founder, the Baal Shem Tov. When Stein came out, she was shunned by her family and received much scorn from the Hasidic community. Conservative Judaism has mixed views on transgender people. In 2003, the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards approved a rabbinic ruling that concluded that sex reassignment surgery is permissible as a treatment of gender dysphoria, and that a transgender person's sex status under Jewish law is changed by sex reassignment surgery. Until now, 2017, there have not yet been any openly transgender rabbis or rabbinical students affiliated with conservative Judaism. But the Jewish Theological Seminary, one of 3 conservative movement schools, openly admits students of all sexual orientations and gender identities for rabbinical training and ordination. Also, Emily Aviva Kapoor, who had been ordained privately by a conservadox rabbi in 2005, began living as a woman in 2012, thus becoming the first openly transgender female rabbi in all of Judaism. In 2016, the Conservative Rabbinical Assembly, which is the International Association of Conservative Rabbis, passed a resolution affirming the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming people. Reform Judaism has expressed positive views on transgender people. Reform Judaism's Central Conference of American Rabbis first addressed the issue of transgender Jews in 1978, when they deemed it permissible for a person who has undergone sex reassignment surgery to be married according to Jewish tradition. In 1990, the Central Conference of American Rabbis declared that people who have undergone sex reassignment surgery may convert to Judaism. In 2003, Reuben Zellman became the first openly transgender person accepted to Hebrew Union College. He was ordained there in 2010. Also in 2003, the Union for Reform Judaism retroactively applied its pro-rights policy on gays and lesbians to the transgender and bisexual communities. In 2006, Elliot Kukla, who had come out as transgender 6 months before his ordination, became the first openly transgender person to be ordained by the Hebrew Union College. In 2015, the Union for Reform Judaism passed a resolution on the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming people, with 9 points calling for securing and defending the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming people to respectful and equitable treatment, and affirming its own commitment to continued pursuit of the same. In the Baha'i faith, transgender people can gain recognition in their gender if they have medically transitioned under the direction of medical professionals, and if they have sex reassignment surgery. After the sex reassignment surgery, they are considered transitioned. They may have a Baha'i marriage. Turning to the major dharmic religions, Hindu philosophy has the concept of a third sex or third gender. The people in this category of sex gender are called Haziras in Hinduism. This category includes a wide range of people with mixed male and female natures, such as homosexuals, transsexuals, bisexuals, the intersexed, and so on. Such persons were not considered fully male or female in traditional Hinduism, being a combination of both. They are mentioned as third sex by nature and were not expected to behave like ordinary men and women. Haziras identify themselves as incomplete men, that they do not have the desires for women that other men do. This lack of desire they attribute to a defective organ. If a Hijra is not born with a defective organ, and most are not, he must make it so by emasculation. They often kept their own societies or town quarters, performed specific occupations such as masseurs, hairdressers, flower sellers, domestic servants, etc., and were generally attributed a semi-divine status. Their participation in religious ceremonies, especially as cross-dressing dancers and devotees of certain temple gods or goddesses, is considered inauspicious in traditional Hinduism. Some Hindus believe that third sex people have special powers, allowing them to bless or curse others. However, these beliefs are not upheld in all divisions of Hinduism. In Hinduism, the universal creation is honored as unlimitedly diverse, and the recognition of a third sex is simply one more aspect of this understanding. Most Buddhist scripture does not distinguish same-sex sexual activity from heterosexual activity, both being seen as non-conducive to spiritual growth. In Thai Buddhism, being Kathoi, an umbrella term that roughly maps to a range of things from male to female transsexualism to male homosexuality, is seen as being part of one's karma, if it should be the case for a person. The response is one of pity rather than blame. Kathoi are generally seen as not likely to form lasting relationships with men, and the lay explanation of their karma is that they are working out debts from adulterous behavior in past lives. In the past, they disrupted marriages, and now they are doomed to never marry. In Thailand, Kathoi are still not allowed to legally become female or to marry a man. Same-sex marriage is not possible in Thailand. Transgender women, however, can marry their European partners if that is legislatively possible in their partner's country, and subsequently leave Thailand. In Theravada Buddhism, monks take vows of celibacy, and self-control over sexual impulses are idealized as part of the path to nirvana. In the 1980s, in response to growing awareness of the AIDS crisis, some Buddhist writers drew on Buddhist teachings to argue that homosexual behavior was unnatural and unethical and demonstrated a lack of self-control. However, other Buddhist scholars have argued that karmic debt also accumulates around heterosexual immorality when patriarchal notions of male ownership of female sexuality are disrupted. According to this view, the difficulties and pain of gender-variant lives are part of how this debt is paid off in subsequent lives, and as such, it incurs no additional karmic debt. Wicca is a contemporary pagan new religious movement. It was developed in England during the first half of the 20th century and was introduced to the public in 1954 by Gerald Gardner, a retired British civil servant. Wicca draws upon a diverse set of ancient pagan and 20th century Hermetic motifs for its theological structure and ritual practices. Wicca has no central authority. In most branches of Wicca, A person's status as trans or cisgender is not considered an issue. Transgender people are generally magical people, according to Carla McLaren in her Energetic Boundaries study guide. Transgender people are almost always welcomed in individual communities, covens, study groups, and circles. Many transgender people were initially attracted to modern paganism because of this inclusion. Thank you for listening to this video. Visit my practice website to find out more about my cosmetic surgery practice for transgender and cisgender people.